The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with the panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today, we are again looking at recent events over the weekend. Mark, where are we now? We're going to talk about what happened in Minnesota.
Let's hit up Minnesota.
All right, where the two Democratic lawmakers, the former speaker and her husband, were both murdered, and another Democratic lawmaker and his wife were shot. There were 17 bullets between the two of them. And they protected their daughter. They are both alive, and their daughter is alive. However, the former speaker and her husband were both shot and killed in their beds, and their dog also was shot and had to be euthanized. The individual was apprehended. Turns out that he is a registered Republican, Trump supporter, a person who did not care for reproductive rights. Some of the comments from Republican lawmakers have been, in my view, absolutely inappropriate. Trump has not called the governor of Minnesota, which any president ought to do. It shows certainly the very low character of the current executive branch of the United States, and the permissiveness coming from the head of the executive branch of the United States for political violence. The condemnation for political violence from the executive and from Republican lawmakers has not been nearly what it should be. The pardoning of the January 6th insurrectionists sets an entirely different tone of permissions to commit political violence. And so, Mark, Scott, what do you have?
Well, go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think it's telling when, the President of the United States is asked on Air Force One, did you call the Minnesota governor? And he looked at them and said, why would I? Really? I mean, that's unthinkable, and it truly is unthinkable. So that tells you the character of the person that is the current president of the United States right there. It shouldn't matter what party they were from. It should matter that they were lawmakers, that they were Americans, and they were killed, and it is the president's job. Now, I know he doesn't think it is. He thinks his job is to attend military parades and, run around as if he's Kim Jong-un. But the fact is that is historically the job of the president of the United States. And I think back to the time when George Wallace was shot in the assassination attempt. His opponent, who was black, politically, they totally disagreed. But she went and visited him in the hospital. Now, it's hard to, you get different reports as to what was said, but it was by what I understand from many of the reports, it was a very polite conversation, more well-wishing than political rhetoric. And that's the way we're supposed to be. That really is the way that we're supposed to be. And I really do think that some of these arrests that you're seeing around the country of lawmakers who are Democrats, I think we're beginning to see that's the game plan. Arrest them, disrupt them, as Brooklyn mentioned before. The power centers in these blue states. So far, nobody's been able to identify them. Maybe the Democratic headquarters in each state. Maybe that's what they're going to go after. And the fact is that this is what we're becoming. Where if you are if you're a Democrat, or if you do not, or if you're an independent that does not agree with Trump and his cult, you're at risk, and it's unfortunate. It truly is unfortunate, but that's the road that we're heading down right now. Scott?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a great photograph in the newspapers yesterday of the Senator Tina Smith confronting the Utah Senator Mike Lee over some of the trolling, I guess you would call it, that he was doing about the shooting, right? That these are Marxists. This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way, and that's obviously a very disgusting comment. But I control with the best of them, I think, and there are some certain times where you just kind of have to have self-restraint and not use every single thing out there as a vehicle for a joke. Mike Lee certainly should know that and clearly doesn't. But the bigger thing to me is the amount of political violence that's going on in this country. I mean, we've seen since Trump has been in office again, the governor of Pennsylvania's house was set on fire during Passover when he had company over and people there. Thankfully, there were no casualties on that one. We've seen other instances of political violence. Certainly, we saw plenty of it the first time, and Trump won. And we're seeing it again. And this is political violence. This is somebody who, has a certain point of view, wants to make clear that people who don't have that point of view are paying a price for it. And it has to break your heart that this is going on in this country right now. And it's not new, obviously, but it does seem to have picked up. The pace seems to have picked up. Certainly, Colorado, the guy trying to set people on fire there, the other instances. So, in fact, we were talking in another segment about the No Kings marches. There was actually a casualty in Utah. Then when one of the, I want to say rent-a-cops, they call them peacekeepers. I don't really understand that term exactly. Picked up a gun and fired it at somebody and missed the person that he was shooting at and killed an innocent protester. So like the Second Amendment people are quick to pull out their guns and use them when they shouldn't. And for years, we've heard from the Second Amendment people that, this is not about hunting. This is about tyranny. And the only way to stop tyranny is by making sure that the citizens have guns. And we're in a position, I think, where we're seeing a would-be tyrant, if not a tyrant, in office, and they're missing it because they're on the same side as him. And, it's a double pity there, because if you were going to, fight for liberty in America, you would be fighting against Trump, not for him. And I don't understand how the Second Amendment people are missing this, because they seem to be so sensitive to any sort of like reduction of their rights. And we're seeing reduction of rights all over the place. And we're seeing masked men in unmarked vehicles with no insignia at all on them or their vehicles, picking up people. We're seeing, one of my friends that I ditched just recently had proclaimed, I'm not against immigration, only against illegal immigration. But these ICE officers are waiting for people to show up at their hearings, which means that they're doing things legally and they're arresting them. And we saw that in New York City with the comptroller getting assaulted and arrested by officers from the federal government. We saw this with Alex Padilla, the junior senator from California, being manhandled at a press conference for Krista Noem. And we see continually this idea that immigration in cities, and Trump said this the other day, that he wants to limit ICE to the big Democratic cities, he named Chicago and New York, because those are the ones who are allowing illegal immigrants to come in and presumably, I think, vote for Democratic candidates. And that's part of the great replacement theory, which is we've discussed on this podcast before, which is all about replacing white voters with brown voters who are more compliant and more likely to vote Democrat than Republican. So, there's a lot going on with political violence in this country. It's gone too far. It needs to stop. Leadership needs to step up, and it's not going to step up, right? Trump is not going to step up. As Mark pointed out, he refused to call the governor of Minnesota. He's tacitly approving of this kind of violence, and he has and did in his first term, and I don't expect it to stop anytime soon.
I'm not even sure if he called Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania either. I think Vance talked to him, but I'm not aware now that anybody called Governor Walz, and it was this Lee guy who said, I don't know, what was it, Nightmare on
Wall Street,
Wall Street, or some just unbelievable remark. And this Marxist, they don't get what they, I mean, I don't even know what the man is talking about, and I don't believe he does either. He's just saying whatever he says to be as it's
trolling. Simply trolling.
It's
from a U.S. senator. Trolling.
It is absolutely unacceptable. And I was thinking back to the time when Trump was impeached, and I don't know if it was the first time or the second time, and people were voting. Some of the Republicans who wanted to vote to convict were being apparently convinced by their fellow Republicans not to, because people were afraid of what was going to happen to them and their security and their families if they did vote to convict. And what, unfortunately, the opposite argument was not made, that if they voted not to convict, that the situation was simply going to continue and everything would get worse, that the potential for the continued decline would get worse. And of course, now here we are. Matters are much worse than they were. And had someone made the opposite argument, yes, we are afraid for our security, we're afraid for our family's security, yes, but if we vote not to convict, that's going to send an opposite message, and that's going to be allowing the situation potentially to spiral even further and escalate even further, and that's going to be potentially much worse than if we do it now and stop it now. I wanted to ask you, both of you, I've heard the argument that both sides, that this is not who America is, the violence and so forth. This is not who America is, and this is what we're becoming. And I have also heard that this is who we are now. And I've heard the argument that this is who we've always been. It's just now showing because of, Trump has basically allowed it to come out of the box, that rather than the Proud Boys, whoever they are, the other groups being off in the woodwork, as you say, that instead now they're out in the open, plying their trade, as it were.
So
does that make sense? So what is your view? I mean, is this who we've always been, and it's just now out in the open where everyone can see it, or is it an admixture?
Clearly there have always been crazy people in this country, and on both left and right side of the political spectrum. But I want to point our listeners to a UCLA working paper called Donald Trump's Words, which is co-authored by a political scientist there, Daniel Treisman, and a student of his, Nikita Saban. The paper analyzed transcripts of 99 Trump speeches going back to 2015 to June 2024, focusing on political rallies, mass meetings aimed at the general public, speeches to political parties, political conferences, even labor unions, and then compared those to other speeches made by other politicians, past and present, including American presidential candidates since 2008 and foreign dictators as well. And what the study found was an increased use of violent language over time and a sharp decline in references to economic performance in the way that is kind of what they're calling negative populism, right? A constant use of terms like us and them and separating people and making sure that there are divisions. So I think it's really important to understand that the language that he uses is heard by people, right? He does this on purpose, and people pick up on the terms that he uses, right? And you can even see it now in people talking about the big beautiful bill, but other people have spoken, a lot of three syllable chants and things like that, lock her up and build the wall and all that kind of thing. But also a more aggressive public persona for the president of the United States, and people picking up on that and using it, I suppose, for a permission structure to be able to commit acts of hate and acts of violence that is really second only to the spike that happened right after September 11, 2001, when people were, openly going after anybody who looked like they were of Arabic origin. So my point here is this. We are seeing an uptick in violence. We are seeing an uptick in political rhetoric that is divisive and violent, and it's coming from the top. It's not, this is not a groundswell. People pick up on the language that he uses and they use it themselves and they act accordingly. And we've all talked here about stochastic terrorism, where you sort of like use language that sets off random lone wolves to act. This guy seems in Minnesota seems to be just that, right? A very violent human being. But clearly reacting to things that he's heard, sees perhaps, and goes off the deep end, and people are dead because of it.
So I'm going to take a little different take onto this. I am the proponent of this is who we've always been. And if we look at the history of the United States and Americans, we have always been anti-establishment. We were anti the king, King George III. When the founding fathers were creating this new nation, there were the Federalists, there were the state rights people, and they really were trying to navigate a very, very treacherous pathway to get a nation together. There's many of the founding fathers thought that, hey, each state should be a separate entity and should be totally independent, and that there should be no federal government really to bother with. I mean, and these were the discussions that were being had. So Americans have always been this kind of free-spirited, kind of libertarian kind of an attitude. Even when before the American Revolution, when people came here to the new continent, they came here for freedom from oppression that they were feeling, that they believed that they were getting from where they were coming from. The Pilgrims, all of them came here because of that oppression. But they also believed that their way was the only way. That's why we had things like the Salem witch trials. That's why we had, all these kind of things. Even prior to the United States coming into existence, there were a lot of instances where, yeah, I'm a pilgrim. I came over. But if you're not a pilgrim, I don't want you here. Not here. I want you down the road someplace and never bother me. Leave me alone. Wherever down the road is going to be, probably Rhode Island. But anyway, um, so we've always had that attitude, and gunpowder in its static state only needs a spark to get it going, but it needs that spark. And I truly believe that that spark was given, that permission for this reoccurrence of this individuality. And there's nothing wrong with individuality as long as you understand that individuality also comes with responsibility to the person sitting next to you. And I always tell this to students of mine. Yes, you have rights and you have freedoms, but there are responsibilities that come with those rights and freedoms. And if you don't exercise the responsibilities, maybe the guy next to you isn't going to exercise the responsibilities either. And now we're in trouble. So I am a full proponent that these have always existed, that we've always been this way. I think that there was a spark set, and that set things into motion to where we are. And as you said, Brooklyn, I was one of the first to say, Pandora's box has been opened. You're not going to get them back into it. They're always going to be there. And I know that Scott and I have had those discussions where Scott said, I just want them to go behind the woodwork and, just go away. But they're going to be there. I want them right in front of me so I know what the hell they're doing, because they're dangerous. This is a dangerous group, and I want to know what they're doing.
I'm just curious where you both think we are going in terms of this nation now that, and I know what our track record is in forecasting, but I'm just curious to know, given the violence that is now out of the Jack in the Box and is jumping around, and that likely has always been there, where do you think we're going to be in 5 years, 10 years? Mm-hmm.
Look, as long as we have, a president who continually demonizes Democrats, leftists, immigrants, not just illegal immigrants, but all immigrants, as being undeserving of respect and acceptance, loathsome, dangerous threats to the fabric of our society, we're going to have people who take action on that. And that's going to continue. So I think we're going to continue to see these sort of lone wolf attacks. But I also think that as the country gets more and more divided, as his secret police go out there and start arresting people or detaining people, throwing them in the back of unmarked vans, continually having their faces covered so nobody can identify who they are or where they're from, or are they even police? Do they have any credentials at all? Do they have any training? None of this is known right now, and we're in a dangerous place in this country. I don't think there's any doubt about it, and it's going to continue to be like that as long as the commander in chief empowers people to do this kind of thing and take these actions.
I would agree. I think we're going to hell in a handbasket, to put it very simply. And we will continue to do so until the next election, and we see what happens. We have to see what happens going forward. Right now, you're right, our track record of predicting is really, really bad. So we won't do that. But I think there are signs out there that say that a large portion of Americans who just want to live their lives and be left alone, raise their families, go to work, and just enjoy what it means to live in one of the most prosperous countries in the world, just want to do that. They don't want to go out and be political activists. They really wish that nobody else did either. And I think that hopefully we have seen some glimmer that there's a part of the population that's getting a little fed up and tired of all this. And I totally agree with Scott when he says that, we've got a commander in chief who is basically giving them permission to act this way. So that's a powerful message. That is truly a powerful message. That's the message of pardoning all the January 6th traitors. That's the message. It's okay. As long as you're doing it for me. But then hiding it in the sense of, well, it's for the country. It's for the country. It's like whenever he would come out on stage when he was running the first time around, I always thought it was terribly funny. He humped the flag. Who does that? I mean, who does that? But it speaks to those people that feel disenfranchised. It speaks to those people who all they want is an excuse. Just give me an excuse to go out and do these things, whether it be violence or whatever, assassinations, no matter what it is. Give me an excuse. Because I think that guy that sits in the White House is probably going to pardon me. And he shows. Why should I call the governor of Minnesota? Because, you stupid son of a bitch, it's your job. That's why. Show some humanity, you bone-spurred piece of crap. Get out there and do that. And can't do it. Can't do it. But, as I say, he's giving permission to an awful lot of people to do an awful lot of wrong. And now that I've, my language has changed from academic to New York, that'll be it for me.
You alluded to this. I want to read it so that people can hear what this says, because I don't think this was written by Trump. It probably was written by Stephen Miller. And it says, let's say, ICE officers are herewith ordered by notice of this truth, capital letters, to do all in their power to achieve the very important goal of delivering the single largest mass deportation program in history. That does sound like Trump. In order to achieve this, we must expand efforts to detain and deport illegal aliens in America's largest cities, such as Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, where millions upon millions of illegal aliens reside. These and other such cities are the core of the Democrat power center, where they use illegal aliens to expand their voter base, cheat in elections, and grow the welfare state, robbing good-paying jobs and benefits from hardworking American citizens. The capitalizations here are insane. These radical left Democrats are sick of mind, hate our country, and actually want to destroy our inner cities, and they're doing a good job of it. There's something wrong with them. That's why they believe in open borders, transgender for everybody, and men playing in women's sports. And that is why I want ICE, Border Patrol, and our great and patriotic law enforcement officers to focus on our crime-ridden and deadly inner cities and those places where sanctuary cities play such a big role. You don't hear about sanctuary cities in our heartland. I want our brave ICE officers to know that real Americans, real in capital letters, are cheering you on every day. So I'll stop there. But it's it's total insanity. And it brings up replacement theory. It's calling for, patriotic law enforcement officers to focus on cities, because I guess there are no slaughterhouses, farms, and other places, I guess no hotels, he supposes, where they employ undocumented workers all the time, including at his own hotels. But, this kind of rhetoric leads to violence. That's really all there is to it. And his mind, or whoever's mind this was that wrote this, is a sick person, Trump talks about the auto pen, right? And who's in charge, and as usual, that's a projection. That's a confession. He's not in charge. If he says something, he's likely to reverse it the next day, because he's not the one talking. And he's just a puppet for these hardliners in his own government that tell him what to do and what to say, or grab the phone from him and start sending out these messages. it's a real sad place that America is in right now, and there's nothing going to happen until at least the midterms, if that even happens at all, because he's got both houses. He hasn't passed any legislation, but he has both houses. He hasn't gone back and done the immigration reform. He's really just waiting for this one reconciliation bill to do these tax cuts, because he seems to think if he does tax cuts, then it won't hurt so much when tariffs are hitting people and everything. The cost of everything is so high, because on the one hand he could say, well, look, I gave you a tax cut, so you have extra money in your pocket. You're spending it on tariffs. We've been saying this for months now. But the violence that's going to continue to occur, the radicalization of people, the division of our country into real Americans and everybody else, is going to continue until somehow he's stopped.
Appreciate your reading that. It's just a mishmash, saying whatever buzzwords the writer thinks is going to inflame people's emotions the most. As you say, it's a call to violence, and it simply ratchets up negative emotions and destructive conflict in this country.
Yes, it does. Okay.
So thank you again to all our listeners, and we'll see you all again next time on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium offering social-political issue solutions to NGOs and international government agencies through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research. The Phoenix Research Group is a division of the Phoenix Research Institute, the producer of the Nova Society podcast.